Today, we're talking with Demetrius Bagley, a master at building community. He's grown the Queer Astrology Conference, produced projects like Vegucated and Vegan Mashup, and co created the Black Podcasters Awards. He knows how to bring people together, and he's sharing that wisdom with us. Welcome. Hello.
Hey there.
Welcome to Sky Notes. Good morning or afternoon, Lillian's at lunchtime over there.
Mhm.
And welcome, Demetrius.
Good
All right.
morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world.
Exactly. We're so excited to have you on. One of the principles we have for this show is to showcase how the astrology community dips their fingers into all kinds of other pies, how we organize, what keeps our, gatherings going, and what you have done with that above and beyond what we've said. We were talking just before the show got started about maybe we met each other in Cambridge, maybe we met each other in Denver. I was at Norwalk for quite a few years, so I was working at the bookstore and often would come around and greet people as well. And you were always I don't know, sort of a central influence, right? Like advocating for volunteers and that sort of stuff. But if you don't mind, I'd love to hear about the Black Podcaster Awards and what the impetus was to start that, how the paths go, who we can point in your direction, those kind of things.
Thanks for having me. Wow, many thoughts there. I want to anchor. I love calendars. Even before I started studying astrology, part of what keeps me going with it is of many things and many interest is Cambridge is February 2010 Pisces season. It's NCGR's every so many years conference. I don't remember my title, but something like room monitors manager.
For a track, right?
And then say again.
They had tracks, right?
Yeah, this is a pretty sizable conference of 200-300 people, multi tracks, and actually ended up overseeing recordings, lots of things there without diving too deep in that. But then I probably saw you again. Norwalk 2011 is my first Norwalk.
Okay.
In those days, a lot sort of from 08 to this will lead up to maybe where you landed questions like pod awards for about 10 years 2008 UAC Denver 2008 to 2018 UAC in Chicago. I ended up participating in about literally on site 36 astrologer conferences, except for Norwalk, always as a volunteer at various levels. And even a co-producer in a couple of cases, and a right-hand man, as they used to say, for Donna Van Toen's SOTA state-of-the-art conferences, my late mentor, 2011 to 2016, I think. A little bit of work with her on the 2010, which was the first time I had met her, ironically, at UAC Denver in 08. Staying with the UX and getting to your question, I signed up I saw a tweet 2020, February 15th, that was saying we as in Black podcasters need our own awards. Without backtracking into that, for sure that was riffing off of I think literally Oscars So White, if you know that hashtag.
Oh yeah.
What that's about. And this does not need to happen in podcasting, right? Because it's not the Oscars. It's not 95 years old or whatever the Oscars was in 2020, et cetera, et cetera. Podcasting being about we're speaking live. Most are saying it turned 21 this year. It's the same age, maybe even the same week as Facebook, arguably. I came to answer the question just as a volunteer, no leadership roles, because I'd had so many in astrology and was leaning back from, or thought I was. How do you self-sustain an independent awards?
Yeah.
With the idea to bring that back to astrologers community or communities, and also vegan world, where I've spent quite a bit of time. And we'll see if that happens this decade, which I hope, at least to astrologers. I'm not sure about vegans at this point, since some other awards have popped up in very recent seasons. But that was part of the impetus, and I was, as it happens, was producing an astrology podcast, but not for two astrology ladies, Mecca Woods and Janelle Barger, Stars on Fire, which existed well before. I was a listener and was like, how come this isn't a more regular delivery? Because they just, both Sagittarius suns, just dived in so richly at mixing culture headlines and politics. And it was the 45 era, as in the president, that the first time we had this president. And there was a lot happening, right? Because we're pre-pandemic with comic book or just Marvel, I guess, movies. HBO is hitting another stride. And Dan, of course, the pandemic hits just about 6 months. Or I signed up for Black Pod. What Black Pod Awards literally emerges from this tweet. My fellow co-founder, Georgie Ann Getton, she sees the tweet, which blows up. In context, right? Hundreds, I think it was thousands of reactions and hundreds of comments. I don't know if it's still out there. She said, let's not just, run our mouths, let's do something. And so she, in minutes, buys a URL and then attaches it to a Google form. I'm one of the, I think it was 77 of us, 70 plus people signed up to support in different ways, mostly volunteer. And I'm one of those, certainly not the last one standing. Georgiana is still involved. Lance is still involved, and a couple other people. And some I just went back are some of the most decorated Black podcasters out here now, not the least of whom is Ronald Young Jr. I just came to answer that question. I have a lot of background in Kickstarters, although it's been a minute. Kickstarters proper, right? Crowdfunding campaigns, and run one in Astro World. Almost all vegan, but one in Astro World myself. I just wanted to answer that question. I think one of the and some of that is definitely inspired by dialogues with Donna Van Toen, and many others, but her in particular. And how do we recognize more astrologers? Which, astrology. This is 2025. It's not been a decade that we really, or maybe it's right about a decade. I think a little bit less. I want to say 2017 before we really came to a new peak in terms of publicity, in terms of mainstream embrace, or I don't want to say mainstream, maybe mainstream embrace. That's debatable, but that kind of idea of astrology is everywhere, and not just for obvious reasons, when I say this, newspaper horoscopes, right? Because do newspapers still exist anymore? Sort of, but certainly not in the way that we probably grew up with, right? Where they are, I think I could say ubiquitous here, but certainly all over the place, if that's not. It's changed, a different conversation there about Pluto going through Sag and what that looks like, well past those days. But just more recognition and spotlight. One of the things that Donna did, and different orgs have done, certainly Laura Nalbandian does this with Norwalk. There are many others. I won't try to call all the names I can think of. Right. Is how do you get people onto the roster, right? How do you get them spotlighted, recognized, touted, honored, published, and that's changing in real time because, right, publishing is literally changing in real time. It's not necessarily about paper. I was laughing, Chris Brennan semi-recently, or I think in the last so many weeks, put out his 500th episode of the Astrology Podcast. And I off and on listener, because right, they're usually 2.5, 3, 4 or more hours.
Or 6.
Or I think the longest is 8 or 9 or something. Or maybe that's a YouTube. I don't know how that works. But I was listening to 500, like, what does that look like? Because, right, that overlaps what's on my desk these days, Black Pod Awards. And he's very rare, maybe not as a quote unquote YouTuber, but I think he started as an audio podcaster. But to get to 500 episodes, right, and to get to 10 years and stay anywhere, I don't want to use the C word, consistent, which sort of drives me a little bit nuts in some ways, but persistent is what I'd like to replace it with, and keep going, but take breaks, take pauses, because 25 is 25ing, and variations thereof. But
Yes.
one of the things he said was he is sort of aiming for a not necessarily in the horoscope episodes, I think it's monthlies, but his others where he's researching and not interviewing,
Mm-hmm.
per se, he's more dialoguing. He's looking to put out very consciously, a small, or maybe not small, book
Yeah.
worth of material, right? And he's reading a bunch of books and articles and talking to people.
Exactly.
And I didn't, I've heard people jokingly say that, including myself, but I didn't realize that was very intentional, and very savvy, right? Audio podcasts can get to more than half of the globe and quite easily, the whole globe not being on the internet or even with electricity, believe it or not. Yeah, that was amazing to hear and funny because, again, publishing, um, looser term, use of that term there, has changed so much um, since I was at conferences, 2, 3 times or more in a year, some of those being local, when I was based out of New York City. And yeah, many thoughts there. I should pause there. Um, but that was the impetus for me to sign up to the Black Pot Awards. That Google form was looking for community, ironically, particularly of other podcasters, or excuse me,
Yes.
podcast producers, right?
Okay.
Because
Oh,
I
okay.
hadn't found much online. Certainly, podcasting had been around a long time, but it hasn't quite. I would say podcasting really sort of came of, um, pun intended here, age, and let's say just 3 years ago, 2022. Because when I looked in 2019 and had first talked to Mecca and Janelle on the phone, like, okay, I don't really know what I was getting into. This was just a little sort of side thing. But
Yeah.
looking back at what's happening on my chart and Tyrannus, aka Uranus and Taurus, there was definitely a cosmic hook. And I think I don't know if I have in an email or if it's a conversation, but I remember Chris for a good bit, Brennan, trying to, you should get into podcasting, because I love to talk and had seen quite a bit. Um, Even back when, maybe not quite when we met Lily in 2010, but a little bit after that because I ended up joining
Yeah,
board.
you were not letting any dust accumulate. You were moving through everything. You were looking to see what folks were doing.
That was 15
And
years ago, younger
exactly.
age, and the web is really heating up in a different way. We're just coming onto or off of, I'm not sure without looking it up, but in 2010, blogs are still quite hot.
Right.
Instagram, I think, debuts that middle of that year. I don't come to it until like a year and a half later or something like that, but it comes on my radar in uh, maybe in 2011 actually, or 2010 it comes on my radar, and then 2011 it pushes in this particular way. Without going into that here, a second degree connection is at Instagram in those early days, and that just kind of catches my energy, which I'm glad it did. But I'm really enthralled with Twitter. And was Twitter to me was the AOL chat, the main,
Yeah.
I don't know, five,
Yeah,
7.
we're sort of in between the next the way we connect. It used to be ICQ, and then it was like a messenger, and then it's whatever's happening right now, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot going on, right? A lot of energy around, and community feels really critical now, like absolutely, life-saving. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, when you talk about Kickstarters and you talk about community, right?
Mhm.
I got to study for 4 months in Scotland, got to study
Mm,
art, and got to hear about how they take care of artists once you've made that commitment and they see your quality. And that
mhm,
commitment includes subsidies for housing. It includes associating you with a gallery. It includes shows. And so there's a real meeting of people where there's development expected and a certain quality of it that you're keeping going. And, like you, I have volunteered a lot, and I felt like it was really the best way for me to offer what I had to offer, and also to listen to all the astrologers for a decade or two. And now it's sort of, it's also emergent that I can't see it. All I can see is what you're talking about. Are we seeing everyone who's doing this good work? And are we bringing them in? And if not, why not? And then is there capacity to provide more support? There are scholarships and there are other things, but I know things are getting tough for everyone. So what if it's books? I know what you're saying. I know some of those people who are doing okay. But I'm in North Carolina, in Durham. And so yesterday we had insanity and training and all sorts of stuff to be protective in case, the ice wouldn't melt. So, and with COVID remaining, in particular, Tracy and I talk about this quite a bit. What are COVID safe events, and who can tolerate that? And is that sort of in line with like supporting disability and supporting people who are coming at this from a different angle? So I'm always looking for that kind of stuff. I'm not in any position to address it now, but maybe in a couple of years we'll be able to throw money at it and make it a fundraiser. Because that's another thing that I find compelling is we haven't done this yet. Like we have no advertising. I deeply admire Chris's work. How could I not? Right? It's sort of like watching Fringe for plot holes. You're not going to find one. And so like I'm on his transcript page, I'm listening, I'm watching, all of it is delicious, but we're not all Chris, nor do we need to be. And so, yeah. So I'm interested in how people team up and in how people join together and in how we can facilitate that more. Even if it's just having the capacity in our own minds to see it, we were on Alex Trenoeth's show recently. And before I was on her show, I was like, I hadn't had a chance to watch the podcast. I had no idea how she was going to finagle, a movie and the person who played them. And then here we go. And I love that kind of ingenuity, but there's a million different angles, right? So anyway, I think I've said enough without kind of getting on a soapbox. So I'm going to pass it over to Tracy, who I think has something to say.
Well, I actually have some questions because there's somebody who, created a conference who's also volunteered a lot and, building community and maintaining community. Demetrius, I think you and I met at NORWAC in 2011. I think you were just sort of coming off of the vegan project, and that was very much center for you. And we talked a lot about vegan chocolate.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Food. I remember food conversations. Sorry. And
Luna Cancer in the second house. No apologies necessary.
so your moon sits in my fifth house, so that's probably why we went there and enjoyed that conversation. But so that was my first experience in the astrological community and seeing what a conference. Even I don't think I'd actually, other than hair shows, I'd never truly been to a conference. I had no idea what that looked like. And when you talk about, that timing and 2011, we were in such a massive shift at that time, just like we are right now, because that was still a very sort of old guard conference, and it was very white and it was very, all of the things. And we just started to move into creating diversity, and you guys have done such amazing work in creating that and continue to. But when I was trying to work a conference, first of all, I live in a place that's very hard to get to, so that is always a challenge. But even in motivating people to volunteer and in creating a community that people want to help in, like I find, and I in all the orgs I've sat on a board with, getting people motivated to also volunteer and also help, and as opposed to just complain about the $40 they spent and what are they going to get for it, you know? Sorry, Mars and Sag.
Fair.
But you know what I mean? It's
Very
so
much.
true,
Which is
right? And
fair,
so
yeah.
how like, is there a trick to that? Is there a trick to encouraging people to do a little bit more? That's my question.
Mm.
I don't know if I have the answer to that. I know that it's out there. I'll shout out John Marcussello, who's a master uh, astrologer and educator besides, and also uh, one of the most I know you've done a lot of volunteering, Lillian. I'm not sure how much you've done, Tracy, but sounds like quite a lot as well. And certainly I know I've done above and beyond. I think I'll just
Oh, yeah.
riff back on what literally what you said, Lillian, without trying to grasp for other words. But John is really great. I think about kind of meeting and inviting and welcoming people. And then I think I don't know his whole chart. It was Aquarius Sun. At
Oh,
some point, saying, "Oh, I think this person is a speaker," or um, is
that's
good in
nice.
a group and doing the mailings. I don't think that even happens anymore. Back to the publishing part of this conversation, and but you need someone to sort of hat sort, if you will. Shout out to Harry Potter fans,
Mhm.
and that's a skill, right? And to keep that and then to make that happen, right? The a little bit different than how you said, Lillian, a few minutes ago, but there's building,
Right.
but maintaining is very different work, and I would argue includes is better off including the encouragement. That's not where I've aced. I'm a okay hat sorter. That isn't really what I'm after, and I haven't held the sort of positions that John has by any stretch. And some of that's intentional on my part.
Mm.
What I have found is the complaining I have experienced. I've sat on a board and sat astrology board and adjacent to another board. Uh, dot dot dot. Um, I find where the mismatch is greater to me is people very eager and ready to volunteer and to make changes, sometimes not worthwhile, but a lot of them worthwhile and needed and already discussed changes. And there aren't enough and this isn't just astrology or astrologers, there aren't enough mechanisms. Some of that just being sign up forms, ironically, but also, okay, here's what we discussed at this meeting. Let's pull this out. Okay, here's access on Airtable or whatever the software is, reasonable access.
Mhm.
For this volunteer, and then to just keep them going on the path, because one of the challenges of I think anything in life, arguably more so nonprofits that are mostly or all volunteer driven, is to keep someone going forward on the path, right? To
Yes.
maintain so you can serve a membership slash community, or just even if it's not structured like that, a mission. Those are, you don't have to be a nonprofit or even a business. I think it's, how do you keep the work going, and a relationship must less, plural, and then, the one to many or a few to many. Those are, I don't think they're hard. Corey's son here, though, so bias. But I don't think they're easy, and for sure at points they're going to get uncomfortable. But I think certainly at this age, or my age, um, I'm starting to think about my second Saturn return without going more into my age right now. But yeah, I think the encouragement can be harder. Um, I'm probably not as astute as most astrologers or some that I hear about. Squares and oppositions in particular, I think, is a very tricky thing to
Mm.
describe when we're talking about a real world or real life or real lives uh, uh, going. But however you work an opposition, astrological opposition, I think that's it. Because sometimes the person you want to encourage, or who has the talent, who you've pegged, I don't think it's necessarily go direct, or maybe you do. It depends. You have to. I think that's one of the things. Donna Ventoa and John Marcosella, a little bit Kirk Kahn, or actually more than a little bit. my buddy who ran the NYC astrology meetup for many years.
Ah,
Yeah, you have to just have that knack, and I think you have to have some charisma, right? As we're talking about, certainly speaking of New York and their mayor-elect,
you
right?
have
And
to
Leo
want.
placements, thinking about John and Kirk. Um, Donna came at it from a different angle. Um, I don't think she had anything Leo. Well, maybe probably Pluto and Leo, but I don't think that was what was. You know what? Actually, maybe that is what's going on her chart. I think she's Leo descendant. So I think that's, and I was thinking about that actually, just in terms of U.S. politics. So I think the Leo and Obama and Bill Clinton, without going more there, but I think that is one of the tools, right? Find the Leo strength on your team or in yourself, and the encouragement. But I know the lost opportunity way too many times is that matchmaking of, they're ready, they've asked about it, they might want money and/or a board seat or this, that, or the other,
Right.
right? That can be negotiated, right? Bring in the Libra slash or the Venusians, but that doesn't happen. I think that falls short, not even through the cracks. I don't even think it gets to the crack. I just think it sort of is sort of DOA, as we used to say, dead on arrival.
It's a mystery, right? And, if I may, I'd like to share how I approached doing the bookstore at Norwalk, because it was prime real estate for people to express whatever frustration they had had through the day or
Mm,
through the conference, right? It was innocuous. It wasn't coming at a speaker or at somebody who was in charge.
mm,
And I found very often that people were, I want to go, at the cash register, or not that they were behaving poorly, but I saw frustration. And so one year I remember offering hugs, and the whole thing about offering is you have to hear the no and be cool with that. And I was. And then the next year somebody happened to gift me a bunch of necklaces, costume jewelry, which normally I would say is wild. And what am I going to do with that? At a conference, forgive me, at a DoubleTree Inn, I'm going to offer this to every woman and man who walks by. And that was really fun. There was a year where I had tattoos, and I remember, tattooing Demetra George with the moon phases, and hearing this amazing story about circus camp and the tattooed lady. So
mm.
that's part of what piqued my interest about who these folks are. And I share this because number one, I think if we obscure the air signs in this who are willing to be seen, we're crazy. Do you know what I'm saying? So I look for the air signs before the Leo, because I want to know who's going to be available and not go, why are you asking me a question?
Yeah, that's not an air sign response.
No, it's not. Thank you. I'm ready. And then the other piece is that kind of the rabble rousers, right? The folks who are going to come without discussing it with anyone and like put little signs up and do a scavenger hunt and all of that kind of stuff. And how do you kind of invite that in too? And then immediately when you said, it is reasonable to say, let's let you volunteer. It's a taste test. That's brilliant. And then let's make being on a board different, and let's make this different, and let's make this different, because we want you to go through an entire arc in this community, and that arc has highs and lows, and you can achieve them. But like they just yoinked all of the career paths for nurses and a million other people in the United States DOJ for no reason. And I remember this being at Microsoft for 14 years. I was a producer there, and there was no career path. And guess what? If there's no career path, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be navigated out. And so I think about that, and I think about, what I started with, which is the I'm sure it's gone by now because Brexit was such a shocker, but the old style way of supporting artists in the UK, right? The old style way of giving people stipends, and there's a place for you when you're in intermediate. There's a place for you where you're expert. There's a lot of autonomy, but here's what being in the group looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. Is there anything, Demetrius, when you were moving into working like with the Queer Astrology Conference, let's say, were there any things when you joined that movement or that organization that surprised you, that took you by surprise in terms of trying to work with a group to grow something?
Hmm. Yes is the short answer. I need a minute. I'll probably cry. I am crying here.
Mm.
Mm.
I remember a call from Ian, who is
Yeah.
I'm gonna gender this a little bit. Sorry, Ian. The mother of, or I'm saying it's the mother that the lead parent might be a better way to say, of Queer Astrology Conference before the first one. Queer Astrology, there's two things here. There's Queer Astrology as a movement, as a org, not org, and then the Queer Astrology Conference is one of its biggest blossom, sort of 6 times. It comes from not seeing enough out queer astrologers at UAC 2012, New Orleans. Jack Fertig, who passes that just weeks after that, but is thinking about a queer astrology gathering conference and out queer astrologers. Um, Backing up for anybody listening who doesn't know, UAC, United Astrology Conference,
Thank you. Sorry about
happened
that.
quite a few times. It's the mothership of astrologer conferences. Um, it's an amazing time, and I think Tracy said a good few minutes ago, and I want to stack on this, and bring them together. If you're an astrologer listening to this, you haven't been to an astrologer conference in person yet, I urge you to do what you need to do to pull together your coins. Volunteering can defray the cost quite a bit. Getting a roommate can as well. The first time I recommend unless you're very easily overwhelmed, stay at the hotel, because everything that you are going to get at a conference, whether you stay at a hotel or not, is not going to be on the schedule. A lot of it is the hallway conversations, is the necklaces that
Yes.
Lillian's successor, right, in 2025,
Yeah.
2026, never is passing out. It's the serendipity, if you will. And not saying that any of these schedules are slouches. I still refer to and think about talks from UAC '08 is really the first big conference I go to. There's 2 or 3 local ones I go to in New York City, and I can certainly reference those in ways that sit when I'm sitting and working a chart or something. Um, I lost. Gosh, my mind jumped a good few places there. Um,
I got really thoughtful about when you said, I kept thinking about how we're such a lively intellectual group. And
mhm.
it's rare where you have access to so many folks who preceded you in their rise in career and still can have coffee with them and stuff. But what you were talking about was at UAC in New Orleans, there weren't a lot of out folks. And so Jack came up with this queer astrology. And
Thank
here's,
you.
yeah,
And not to say there weren't out astrologers
right,
there, but
right.
this is, I don't remember the number. It was 1,300, 1,600 in attendance, right? All in.
Huge,
That's huge,
huge.
huge. And it was New Orleans. We are literally on the edge of the,
Yeah.
I forget what it's called, whatever the district. Right. It's May,
French Quarter.
French Quarter.
Yeah.
So there's, right, the energy's there, and right, New
Yeah.
Orleans, but just getting together wherever we are for any conference, particularly UAC, which is right the largest, at least on this side of the world, is just something. So 2013, July, is that first Queer Astrology Conference. I went out. It was in San Fran. The first two were in San Fran, um, 2013, 2015, and you said, "Did anything surprise me?" It surprised me in some ways, Tracy, that it took so long to get astrology that felt fresh and current. I think you were saying this earlier. I don't know if it was about books or not at the second, Lillian, but there was a way that it was so healing, not only for queer astrologers in the room, but also allied astrologers, as it were, and that's in some of the recordings. If you listen to some of the Q&A, which they're there and not there on the web without that tangent right now, but those are most of those are around, and also the way that there was um, it wasn't hierarchy, very intentional, right? San Fran,
Love
very
that.
lefty, very queer and very intentional. It was very cathartic, right? I've been to I don't remember how many conferences at that point, but without me trying to count, let's say that was, for sake of a number, that I'd been to 12 conferences at that point, and maybe a little bit less, maybe at least double digits, at least 10, maybe it's 15, but give or take 12. And a lot of not the weekend, but there were a lot of points I was crying through both days, um, as release and relief, because one of the key things from there that was acknowledged in real time on stage and in the audience, and then it was a thread I noticed throughout the weekend and ever since, is astrologers hold a lot of responsibility. I'm paraphrasing, yet we're so maverick because we really can get into someone's lives in ways that very quickly, that almost no one can, including, sorry, not sorry, uh, therapists, psychologists, social workers, and.
Yeah.
They've been trained and they have a very different path, defined path, right? And licensure, I think in most cases, and even coaches, we do not for worse, I would say, and better, without going into that argument here today. I'm not sure if I'm the one to make that, but that was important for me as a long time. I'd been in astrology right about, I'm coming to 20 years. I think I'm at a nodal return at that point, 20
Oh,
years. And I had backed away from being, having, going and getting to a consulting astrologer, because some of what I had been told looking at my chart, by a queer astrologer in one case, and at least in one of the two cases, it was harmful. And that coming up, and even the shape of one of the talks, if I recall, it was Barry and Jessica's talk. I don't remember the name of the talk, but they were very conscientious about, right, these are people who are writing weekly horoscopes, locally published in those days, and also seeing clients. I think Jessica, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, I believe she still sees clients. And let me full name, Astro Barry / Barry Perlman, and let me say her name right, fellow Canadian, Jessica Lanyadoo, both immense talents as astrologers and just great people. I needed that at that point, Tracy. So it was surprising. I expected right queerness, I expected right innovation and pushing, but I didn't expect this really just emotional community, a personal catharsis, right? You heard in brief, but community. There was so much, right? And there's a mix of ages / generations in the room, and people from all over the world, largely the US, right? Or US, Canada, I think, that needed that unplanned comment from an audience that threaded through, I would say about half or a third to half of the talks throughout the weekend, about being more right. And in some ways it was, I can't remember my thought exactly being there in real time, but it was very postmodern. Are we thinking about, right, if we're a messenger of sorts, astrologers, are we thinking about the message in more detail and who it's being delivered to, whether you're writing for a mass audience that you don't really interact with in those days, right? Because it's literally newspapers, whether it's a one-to-one consult, any other sort of combination. And there was a definite hunger named in the room, for and I think an explicit call. I don't remember if it was Ian or Jessica or someone else. But pretty sure that's on another recording somewhere. But it's a blink and you miss it. But it's something I had been waiting for, and had heard from actually elder astrologers for maybe years. It was time for a new wave of astrology books. Well, guess who publishes, right, one of the best-selling all-time astrology books a handful of years later? Channing Nicholas, right, who's instrumental about this happening. A year or two after her, I don't remember the years, maybe even a year before. I think it is the year before. I don't remember when Channy's book comes out. I think it comes at the beginning of, I don't know, like a 2018, 2019. Jessica puts out a book. Channy's book is delayed a year without backtracking that. Jessica's comes out within months. I don't remember. I want to say a few months before. And then there are others that is part of. I don't think that's the reason per se, Queer Astrology. So what surprised me is how it definitely opened to a new era. And then can't stress this enough. It's not what you described, the way I heard it, at least in Scotland. Uh, but having that soil, if you will, having right, and they're all local at that point, right? Jessica,
Right.
Ian, Barry, Lawrence, and then there are quite a few other names. San Francisco Bay, let me say, Stella. They're having planning meetings, right, to host this and then to host a second one, but they're able to exchange in a way that is more the norm, right? I mean, really throughout arguably, let's say modern history, but not necessarily, certainly not this decade, right? Because of the pandemic and right,
Right.
Zoom. Here we are on Restream. This isn't a thing, right?
Right.
That we're doing right now. I know people are Skyping. Like I was Skyping. I think some people are recording it, but it's not ubiquitous. It's not. I think most of those are private. I think very few of those are public and live streamed. Right. The power of this for, I don't know if I want to say pennies, but but let's say dollars, but very few dollars.
Yeah.
This and I don't know how slow or fast the internet was, 10, 12, or I guess it's 12 years ago. That's all changed, but back to my, encapsulating as I do publishing. So that has been surprising and so, Tracy, and so needed. And I knew the need was there. I'm hearing myself say and others say of all ages, definitely hearing it from millennials haven't quite emerged yet on the conference scene, but boomers, not the least of whom is Donna Van Tomen, right? And is doing things with her conference to program a mix of ages and geographies and topics and esoterics, as you will, things that aren't necessarily in academic flavored, if you will, astrology. And also, I knew this going in. We Gen X, right? These are all Gen Xers that I just named, right? Specific to Queer Astrology, I'm a Gen Xer.
We all are.
Yeah.
We can create our own things and not in a threat or per se opposition. Others may have disagreed with that and did well there. And there were boomers in the room. One who's just Auntie Astra. I forget how she goes by online, but people have ally, auntie, and a woman of color, etc. But that was important. We needed a new model of and a new offering of coming together. I'll say here, one of my big drums I beat, astrology or not, is one of the most powerful things we can do, we people, we humans, and certainly in this country with our privileges as they are now, and likely I think will continue to be for quite a while. But I know those are being challenged right now, or you, but is bringing people together, right? Thank you for having me here. Conversation, private and public. It could be an email exchange. I grew up with I think this is the pastorals, what they call it, and writing letters back and forth.
I love that.
Because we didn't have internet, right? As teens and preteens. But if you could get the address, right? And then it was, could you get the number, and then you could leave a message because there's voicemail. And right, fast forward to email. Email is still something people pay a lot of attention to. Obviously, texting is more popular from some data, or it's more instantaneous response. Let me rephrase that. But almost everyone on the planet who has email, which is literally billions of people, almost all of us check our email multiple times a day, and we open some of those emails. Now, do we act on that email? I haven't seen that data, not necessarily, but text do. But I say that because the communication tools are amazing. And yet, going back to your encouragement, do we know how to artfully, effectively, persuasively, respectfully,
with a good cadence,
communicate with cadence, with follow-ups, or no follow-ups depending, and. I think we know, but then I think we have to sort I certainly do, our individual selves out, and also whoever the Virgo or whoever out there, we need those standards, and that I don't know about a checklist for everybody, but I wouldn't mind one. Those standards that refresh of etiquette,
Mhm.
because I keep hearing from different experts. I'm trusting them. We are biologically wired to be connected, and we are
Absolutely.
connected, but we aren't necessarily in bread breaking situations or distance or budgets and so I
Right.
think we have to keep some of the bread's a thing, and also so is Restream and Zoom and Google Meet and Facebook Live and so on and so forth, right? We don't only live in an analog world anymore. That's just what that is.
Mhm.
And this is amazing. So I think this is why Gen Xers are here, and I think we're very I don't think we're very good at it. I think we're great at it, but not necessarily all the time. I think the rest are still adapting because, right, we had, how did you say? I think publishing drastically changed, right? Leaving the last century into this one, not because of the century change, but Pluto and Sag. Um, then we have social media just, and the mobile changes things, leaving the knots, and there's more to say there without
Yeah.
trying to press also here. But and maybe I didn't press and point this part. Inviting someone to dialogue, to eat, to soup, to tea, to sit and look at the sky, the stars, or both. I was thinking daytime sky. That's part of the work.
Absolutely.
Even if it might not say like it's that's so simple, but if we're all and we're not all, but I do think it's more common these days, isolated or at home or have pulled back, maybe for good reason, maybe not, and maybe for lack of an invitation, but extend invitations, accept invitations, or at least decline them with uh, care. And I'm not available this. Yes, I'd love to, but not, that this date and time doesn't work for me. Could we
Right.
do this? Could we do it next week that same time? Or I think there's too much, I don't know if that's, and I'm an Aquarius, but fixed sign, or I don't know how I would talk about it astrologically, but sometimes we're shutting down and just that's it. And part of what I definitely know as a double air sign is there can be a back and forth. There has to be a diplomacy, there has to be an
Absolutely.
exchange, and it's not always comfortable. It's not always known going in. It's not
Yeah.
always under our control, and I don't even mean it's under the other person or other people's control. It's
Well, let's touch into that just a hair. I'm in other groups where um, folks who are more marginalized than me meet separately, and then we come together in a group. And just like if I were to meet with a bunch of more people like me, we would just bypass everything that we liked and say, we want to fix this, 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 and this. And when we're getting the different groups kind of percolating through the community, we want to know everything. And you pointed out one of the first things that we heard, we had Sam Reynolds on to talk about the Zodiac Mafia, but to talk also about the diversity scholarship and how completely nourishing that was. And it came from those words: invite people, invite them, because then you're saying, I'm going to host you, and I'm a huge fan of Sufis. I got to practice with them for quite a while, and they put hospitality over anything. It's kind of like Palm Springs, right? You can't leave someone on the side of the road in Palm Springs because it's too dangerous, because it's too dry, and they may be injured. And so in Turkey, this is where we learned it. You don't want to just leave people wandering. You want to bring them in and take care of them. And that's a thing that we're not all signed up for, right? Like in the nonprofits, there's a implication of that. But
mhm.
at least in the United States, we are pressured to be consumers, not individuals with cool thoughts and ideas and things that we want to align with other folks and build strength with. And so that capacity that you're talking about really resonates. Being able to hear from almost from the outside in how your community is doing, and just being straightforward about that. You know, okay, a lot of people go to spas, a lot of people are sleeping, 5 to a room, right? How do we, jiggle that around a bit? More food in classrooms, right? Or more, you know what I mean? There's ways to hear what could come up down the line. And to me, what's interesting about this time in particular are the things that are threats that I never considered. Like, what if Elon Musk gets cross and takes all of his satellites home, and we don't have the internet for a week and a half? I'm going to want to reach out to somebody, whether it's through the mail or through the telephone, or even to get on a bike and ride over to someone's house so that I can keep figuring it out. And I guess the summary I have is like, I am really oriented to figuring out where those moments lie. And the final thing that helps me do it is something that Carolyn Casey says, and I've been repeating it a lot. She says, it's great to entertain beliefs or entertain ideas. There's no need to believe them. And I love that, because we're such like spontaneous, just right here meat suits, that the words really aren't the, be all end all of how we express and are reflected to ourselves. And so it is a really exciting time to see younger folks, older folks, different ideas coming up. I love seeing all of the different iterations of how we gather.
I'm so curious, Tracy. You said we met 2011, which was probably Memorial Day weekend, Norwalk, right outside Seattle area. Very different version, as you said, of Norwalk, and in different moment, right? It's 15 years ago, 14. What does, I don't know when you've been, but even from what you've most recently to Norwalk, but between that and what you see online, speaking of Sam and diversity scholarships, what does that look like to you now? I think you said a little bit about it, but I'm curious, right? Talking, for me not to talk, although I can. What does that look like now? Because I think one, if not both of you, have sat on, or you said, Tracy, you've sat on a couple astro boards. And in those seats, I found and also observed, it's harder in some ways to move community. I don't think about make per se. I'm not sure if that's the right verb, but something like that. But what does it look like to you now? I'm very, very curious, right? It's things have shifted. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I've always gotten dragged in at those moments when, sorry, somebody just walked in the room. Yeah, dragged in at those moments when the change is happening, and it happened on our local board. It happened with AFAN, and there's this expectation, and what it felt like was, you've got one energy that's like, we really like the way this already is, and there's no need to change. Yeah, and that's very in our local case, that was very fueled by Aquarius energy. Like, there were so many Aquarians with then also very fixed charts who were quite happy with the way things were, but they were literally dying. Like they were around long enough that we needed to move forward and do something different. And so that's that's a lot of energy. And so you can't do that for a long time. You can't work dragging 1,000 pounds behind you for very long. And so what I learned was, be gentle as often as you can. Only drop the hammer when the moment is right. My verbal straightforwardness, as we should say, only came out when the moment was important. And often I find when you're dealing with some fixed energy, you need to cut through it. Sometimes that's the only way, is to kind of with an arrow cut through it. And so picking those moments, right, to go, okay, now's the time we need to move forward. With AFAN, it was a little bit different. Also, at a time of massive change, this was before they were absorbed into OPA, and at a very critical time because they really needed to grow numbers. And again, at this time of publishing was a big part of that story, because they wanted to change the magazine and they didn't know what to do with it. And so being part of things when they're in that critical time it's really exciting, but it's also quite challenging, because you're dealing with the old and the new, and sometimes the old is really dissatisfied. The people who've been around a long time, who've been really wanting the change, are an interesting contribution to the energy, which I enjoy. And those are often the people that can be the most helpful. So when you have people who have the experience in the community, and they've been hoping and wishing and talking and wanting things to move forward, I find that is a great resource when you're trying to move things forward. And then also bringing in the new blood that has a vision that people who have been there too long don't have, right? Because they haven't been able to see past what's already there. And so, did that address your question? Yeah.
There was a whole book of things, of maybe books plural, of adventures. You said they're yours with I'm just thinking of Astro Board / orgs, and I was deep in that for a long time, quote unquote a decade, give or take. And it's been it's been interesting the last 7 years since the last UAC, and Uranus and Taurus, Uranus going through my 12th house, just to really step back and then step further back, and then pick up or take the wheel, as it were, of Queer Astrology for its 5th and 6th conferences, which were both all virtual versus and then the world shifted, the 45 era, and then the pandemic, and it definitely did.
A lot of things changed. And what I love, my approach is always to walk around with the hammer and just go, where do you need it? Where do you need it? Which is not, I can't recommend it. But that's part of why I volunteered for so long. It was to kind of get those rough edges really worked out, because part of the challenge is people show up how they are, and when I showed up, I had a lot of unresolved issues, and I love astrology, but studying any topic is not going to fix you. You know what I mean? And we don't need to be fixed. It's more just, how are we in the world kind of thing. So it's been interesting to see the delicacy that Tracy brings to bear. And when that knowledge of sort of breathing back into gentleness and grace, what do you need for that to exist, right? Like, I've found it for myself, but it was quite a journey. And like you say, it was in part because things kept changing. NORWAC exploded with COVID. They doubled, tripled their numbers. And the environment has been really extraordinary. Tracy and I went to a Kelly Surtees retreat, and we went together specifically because we're both COVID cautious. And even that journey, right? Like, you can be the most reasonable, rational, COVID cautious person and still be dead wrong, because we're not in the future and we don't know what's going on. So it's a really extraordinary. I loved what you said. I don't want to miss it. Tauranus, you called it?
I love that.
That's from Twitter, #Tauranus, right?
Oh my gosh.
Those happen to meld very nicely.
Oh yes, they really do.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And that changed so many things that maybe were fixed forever, right? That were never going to change, that we'd never have to think about twice. And here we are.
Well, that's I would add never, right? Fix
Fair.
sun sign.
Fair, yes.
But I think there's something right, it's Uranus, and then I would argue Taurus is not the most stubborn of the 12 or really the four fixed signs. I
I
think it's
love that.
Aquarius or Scorpio.
Oh,
I think
Love that.
Taurus is more conscious and
Yes.
can be and healthy about holding a position, right? It's Earth. And
Yeah.
then, but right, so and also fixed.
Yeah.
So, okay, oh, this needs to change, right? Early spring, mid spring. Here comes Uranus. Okay, what's a better option, right? Venus. Okay, let's change it.
Nice. I
And we
love
saw a
that.
lot of that immediately into the pandemic, where a lot of
Right.
millennials are still like, well, wait a minute, y'all said this could never be changed. Sorry,
Right.
not sorry. And wait, you just changed it in less than 6 weeks. So which is it?
My goodness.
Because 6 weeks and never are not the same amount of time. And then here comes Gen Z right behind them,
Whew.
right? Then and ongoing now, right? Pluto,
Yes.
I think of them as Pluto and Sag and Sag.
Yeah.
Oh, so right, and then we get the Jupiter, Saturn at 0 Aquarius, of course, a little bit later. But right, all of that is backtracking into our experiences that we heard
Yeah.
here today, or in this conversation, whenever we've listened to. Yeah, that's been fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. I don't know if I could articulate it, but 6 weeks and never are not the same sort of time things,
Right.
not even really on the same this may or may hopefully this comes across the way I want on the same calendar. And
Right.
millennials, one of the things I love about millennials, I think of them, millennials as Pluto and pretty much Pluto and Scorpio,
Yeah.
right back to fixed, but also
Yeah.
like, oh, so wait a minute, this can change. This
Yes.
can benefit the people without getting
Yes.
too much into not directly getting into politics, at least at this second. Yeah, that's been right. And then the technology keeps getting faster.
Right.
And I think you said in a way, Tracy, that I heard but didn't write down, and there were a couple other things said this quite a bit earlier this conversation. That the knowledge, I don't know that it's changed, but it's more out there, not the least of which is astrology. But I'm thinking more this decade and gut health and best practices with old
Right.
software, and I'm thinking, sorry, Microsoft Suite. I'm like, how do people
Absolutely.
still not know about search and replace and spell check on and maybe they just didn't need it before because they were working with numbers or they weren't working with it at all, or um, they didn't have, I think it's in a different way, Tracy, the training, right? We all don't have all of the training that we need for life, much less for work and capitalism and officing and not that it's not out there, but right, that they have to meet up the knowledge in the person, uh, right, the different kind of relationship than I think we've
It
done.
would be beautiful if we had ways to address children who are interested in astrology, ways to address teenagers who are interested in astrology, right? I mean, that all makes sense. One of
Yeah.
the things I wanted to say, I started working at Microsoft in 1999 and stayed there
Oh,
till 2014. And the drumbeat was to put the onus of production of content onto us. And boy, did they do it. And the plus side is we get to see things that we never would have seen before. It's just amazing. You know, if you search and you are diligent, it may not continue to happen. That's what I mean about things changing. But if you search, you can find stuff that's unique, you know, that is untouched by the ages, right? I mean, it's extraordinary. And the fact that, you know, there's I think it's Nico Case song that is everything is free. And they're just saying that because they know we're going to do the work anyway. But in
mm,
a way that returns us to like the old fashioned, the really old tuition, right? We're paying our teachers because we're
mm,
already professionals, right? We are working and we are unifying as like a guild or a professional. So I do see that kind of happening. And then there's one last thing that's totally tangential but intuitive. So I wanted to bring it up. The kinds of things I see, I finally got Hulu because I ditched Amazon. And so I've been watching Reservation Dogs, and I've been wanting to see it for so long. And this is Sterling Harjo and Dallas Goldtooth. And I remember talking to Philip Sedgwick, who was one of the speed bumps because he couldn't go fast enough into everyone's okay and you can be transgender. And you know what? I love seeing Ian in a tutu. Wait a minute, let's get some blush on him. You know what I mean? However, he does do film work. And I was like, this was 2015, let's say. Sterling Harjo and Dallas Goldtooth were doing the 1491s, indigenous group of comedians. And they were doing all of this stuff about, you know, when people walk into a native store, what do they expect? And, you know, can they teach each other drumming? Just sort of the kinds of humor that if you watched Reservation Dogs is now backed by tracks by famous musicians and, you know, has, I can't remember the biggest person who was on that show, but it is a reflection back to him of the quality he had 7 years prior. And it is about that community. They all show up in the extras scenes and they're all super tight. And now they're with Taika Waititi, which is another way of saying like these connections, like I just pray that we get richer and richer connections, both in just straightforward discussion and in all those kind of magical ways where we can vision into the future. Things have been so difficult for Samhain. We gathered to kind of package up what we wanted to give kids because we didn't know how to get it to them, you know, so that they can have it come out when it's time. And then we took on someone who we lost this year to see what messages they have for us, because it is baffling to me how else to think about it. But if we can just do what the 1491s did and come up with this amazing community with really good music, you know, we've got good DJs, we've got good musicians. Thank you all for letting me chit chat in my silly way. I appreciate it. This conversation's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Demetrius. It was great chatting with you about this. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Oh, so many. Thank you both for this and being out here. If you're at an event, please don't be for too long, if at all, the wallflower or the stray. Find your way in, and if you see someone who is that person, please shout out to Christine Dabney, my astrology chef friend, and I think one of your
Yeah.
collaborators, Tracy, who's a retired nurse and a long-time astrologer. That I think there's a lot of work to do going forward, but that inclusion is key. And Sam and Laura's work is specific to the NORWAC Diversity Scholarship and the other places where that's rippled. That has helped the shift, as has Queer Astrology. And I'll just give this quick little bit, and then many other things I want to say, but leave us. The scholarship for NORWAC is a ripple of a live panel Sam and I did with Timon, another Canadian, two other Canadians, and Jen Ing, hopefully I'm saying the names right, at SOTA, I want to say 2011, which would be October or November, something like that. I might have the year wrong, but definitely precedes and then it ripples because Sam is asked, or actually Nicholas is asked, I'm in the NORWAC world.
Yeah.
How can we kind of refresh this and diversify this and take this forward? Nicholas paying Sam, I think a few people, but crucially Sam. And that is, now I think this is the 10th year, this year, 2025, or coming 2026.
Yeah.
I think it was this year. The scholarships have been every year, and it's been a boon, right? NORWAC sells out.
For everyone.
And that rippled into UAC 2018, which of course Laura produced. And there are many other ripples from that. And it's been interesting to see that in this community after so many volunteer adventures, which really for me culminate basically at UAC 2018 in Chicago, but also elsewhere in society, we are, I think a lot of we Gen Xers, part analog, part digital, right? So this Pluto and Virgo, Pluto and Libra, where these bridges, these liaisons, this in between, and back to our converse pre-record, hitting record or going live. Tracy and I were talking about the 29th degree and the 0 degree, right? But between two different signs, and there's a better articulation Tracy just gave a few minutes ago, but right, it's exciting, it's dynamic, and it's also challenging. And you said this, Tracy, I just want to underscore, it's work, and it's needed work, it's satisfying work, but it's work. It needs not just the intent, but the, I don't know if that's momentum or volition or whatever the word is, but and yeah, many other things. Thank you. Even if you're not going to host or co-host or instigate or facilitate or produce community spaces, events, conversations, what have you, thank Lillian and Tracy for having this. Thank other podcasters in YouTube, not the least of
Yeah.
whom Chris, right? For if you can patron them or but just saying thanks is, you'd be surprised, right? Because we are, a lot of us are working so much virtually and not necessarily, I don't know that this is per se your day job. Yeah.
The astrology is, but this is a very expensive hobby, as you know, and it will turn. And as it turns, right, there's a whole nother philosophy of you pay everyone, you figure it out because that's what we need to survive. And so when we get there, we get there. But it's a pleasure not to have any advertisers, especially right now, because they're so crazy. And it really is about, hey, let's look at ourselves. And for folks who don't know about astrology and aren't aware of all of these riches, I want them to know that you don't just have to sit at home. You can explore the world. There are people doing conferences in Florence, Italy, and wherever you can imagine. And also at home, you can join NCGR. You can have your own NCGR. There are ways that we can pull you in so that you can situate yourself to learn the way you need to learn.
I'll shout out, add to that list, right? There are others, but meetup.com, right? A very different vehicle.
Yes.
That is necessarily how I got pulled into secondhand, so to speak, or second degree into NCGR volunteering and Indian. But it was Kirk's, actually, it wasn't Kirk's meetup when I joined. That was, but I met him and Michael Luton.
Oh, yeah.
At, I think the very first one I went to Upper West Side, a Starbucks, as it were, and many other memories there. But thank you both so much for this. And I didn't say, forgive me. Thank you for all the volunteering that you've done, right, through orgs and
Right
other.
back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's key, and also not that visible. But often it's not about the visibility. It's about, I think, again, Tracy said it better a good few minutes ago, moving the needle, if you will.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to press go on our outro. And thank you, Demetrius. I hope you'll join us again. This was really fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.